So we've reached the beginning of a new book, the book of Ezra. It's tucked away there near the end of the history section of the Old Testament, and in some ways it's a little bit overshadowed by its more famous neighbour, the book of Nehemiah. Read together, the two books tell the whole story of the return of God's people from exile. They dealt with the shock of being ripped away from everyone and everything that they knew, taken captive into a foreign land, having to learn new ways to live and worship, away from everything familiar. And as the book of Ezra opens, a king writes a letter, and everything is about to change. This is what it says. In the first year of Cyrus king of Persia, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah, the Lord moved the heart of Cyrus king of Persia to make a proclamation throughout his realm, and also to put it in writing. The king writes a letter, but behind the pen of the king is the heart of God. It's time for God's people to go home. But that brings a whole set of new questions. What about the reality of return? You see, for 70 years or so, the brightest and best of them had been absorbed into the royal households. Even the precious objects from God's temple in Jerusalem had been taken and put in the temple of Babylonian gods. So as the king writes the letter, there's a problem. Well, there's three problems. Are there enough people to go back? Who's going to lead them in worship when they get there? And how can they worship God if all the things they need have been stolen and put in a foreign temple? Chapter 2, verses 1 to 35, begins to answer these questions. In that first section, all the families are listed, all the descendants of those original captives taken away to Babylon. They're all there, listed by name. They've been kept by the power and promise of God. There are people to go back. Then in verses 36 to 58, all the priests and the temple helpers are listed, again by name. All their descendants have been kept safe. There will be people to lead God's people in worship. And then in chapter 1, verses 7 to 11, we find out what happens to all the gold dishes and silver dishes and all the other things that were needed. They're all safe too. They'll be going back. Everything and everyone they needed was going home to Jerusalem. There's echoes throughout the chapter, especially chapter 1, verse 11, of Exodus language. God is about to act again, to rescue and re-establish his people. The time of waiting is over. They're going home. All the people, all the priests, all the objects they need, all kept safe by the power and protection of God. God is on the move, and his people are going home.